This is the Motorola Edge 20. It's a mid-ranger which is quite different from last year's model, the original Moto Edge, both looks-wise and feature-wise. So what does the new model offer, and is it enough to stand out from the mid-range crowd? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our full review. The original Moto Edge was named for its curved display, but the new Moto Edge 20 has a different design altogether. It's totally flat and thin, but its razor-like appearance also fits the name quite well. Our Moto Edge 20 is in the subtle, frosted gray matte finish. The back panel is made from plastic, but the frame is aluminum. Its flat, squared-off edges offer some nice grip, and the phone is overall super light and easy to handle. The triple camera setup has a tri-step design and is actually quite thick. This is one of the more wobbly phones we've used lately if you're aiming to operate on a table or desk. Motorola claims that the Edge 20 is splash-proof, which we've also seen on some of their other phones. There's no official IP rating though, so dunking this in water isn't recommended. The Moto Edge 20's display is a 6.7-inch OLED with a 1080p resolution, Gorilla Glass 3 protection, and a super fast 144Hz refresh rate. That's more like what you'd get on your average gaming phone. And in addition to that, the Moto Edge 20 claims a crazy fast 576Hz touch sampling rate. Altogether, you get an incredibly smooth and responsive experience when interacting with this screen. If you want an adaptive refresh rate, you can switch over in settings, but this mode only goes up to 120Hz maximum, not 144. Sure, since it adjusts the refresh rate based on your content, you'll save energy, but this could have been done better. And while high frame rate gaming is supported, it maxes out at 120 FPS as well, even in the 144Hz mode. The quality of this OLED screen is really nice though. It has HDR10+ support, as well as 10-bit color, and of course, blacks are super deep here. Colors can be accurate depending on the color setting you choose. And while brightness isn't class leading, it's good, and you shouldn't have problems with legibility outdoors. We measured around 470 nits maximum with the brightness slider, which boosts up to 650 nits when in auto mode and bright conditions. For audio, the Motorola Edge 20 has a single bottom firing speaker, whereas the first Moto Edge had a stereo setup. This isn't the loudest speaker around, scoring just average on our charts, but at the same time the sound quality is quite good. There's noticeable bass and well-presented highs. Another change from last year's model is that you don't get a headphone jack here. You'll need to use an adapter if you want to plug in. To wake up and unlock the Moto Edge 20, there's a side-mounted fingerprint reader that doubles as the power button. It's quite fast and reliable. There's also a dedicated button on the other side, which summons the Google Assistant. It's a bit high up to be convenient though. And you get 128 or 256 gigs of storage here, which isn't expandable. The interface of the Moto Edge 20 is a pretty clean and stock Android 11 with some Moto customizations on top. These can, for the most part, all be found in one place, the Moto app. They include personalizations, which allow you to customize the looks of the UI. There's also a panel with instructions for a wide array of shortcut gestures, and from here you can enable or disable them. Then you get the options for attentive display, which will keep the screen on if you're looking at it, and you have the peak display, which acts as an always-on display, but only when you tap or move the phone. You also get gaming options, which can appear through an in-game overlay, as well as media control shortcuts, and audio profiles you can set up for your connected devices. The final feature I'll mention here is support for Moto's relatively new Ready 4 platform. This allows you to connect the phone to a monitor or even a PC for all sorts of things like casting media, video calling, and gaming on a big screen. Behind all of these features is a new chipset, the Snapdragon 778G, built on a 6nm process, and it offers both solid performance and 5G connectivity. In CPU tests, the Moto Edge 20 posts some good numbers, and the GPU performance is respectable too. Everyday tasks and games run smoothly, and the thermal management is great, with almost no thermal throttling. Overall, while it isn't on par with those flagship killers that pack the top-tier silicon, the Edge 20's performance is great for a mid-range phone. Battery life, on the other hand, is just okay. The Moto Edge 20 has a relatively small 4000 mAh battery, and with it scored an endurance rating of 86 hours in our proprietary tests. Mediocre for the class. Charging speed is respectable though. With the bundled 30-watt adapter, we were able to charge the phone from 0 to 68% in half an hour. The Moto Edge 20's camera setup is an upgrade over last year's. There's now a 108-megapixel main camera, together with the 8-megapixel 3x telephoto cam and 16-megapixel ultra-wide. The main cam saves 12-megapixel photos because of 9:1 pixel binning, and these are excellent for the class. There's plenty of resolved detail with good-looking foliage, and there's low noise and dynamic range, which is wide but not over the top. Still, we aren't fans of the heavy-handed sharpening you get in auto mode. If you shoot a photo in the 108-megapixel mode and downsize it to 12 yourself, you'll get more balanced sharpening and more detail too, but it's extra hassle. Portraits from the main cam are nice, with good detail and exposure. Subject separation is good if the background isn't too complex. For some reason, the photos from the 8-megapixel telephoto cam are upscaled to 12 megapixels by default to match the resolution of the main camera. This results in a loss in detail, but the detail level is still okay, and these shots have good colors, contrast, and dynamic range. In a similar fashion, the ultra-wide's photos come out in 12 megapixels too. These photos are just alright. The distortion correction does a good job, and there's high contrast and dynamic range, but the resolved detail is mediocre, and the colors aren't that accurate. Since the ultra-wide cam has autofocus, it can shoot macro close-ups. These come out in the full 16 megapixels, but it appears that they were first cropped, and then upscaled back to 16. This means the detail level isn't what you'd expect from this resolution. At least you get great contrast and punchy colors. In low light, shots from the main cam are great. There's enough detail and low noise, as well as good contrast and likable colors. The exposure is balanced, and because of HDR, there are fewer blown highlights than you'd expect. Night vision mode is only available on the main cam. It's quite fast to process and provides an even brighter exposure, and any blown highlights are restored. It does introduce more noise to some scenes though. The telephoto cam is a reliable shooter at night. Its photos are sharp enough and have a decent amount of detail. The colors are lively too. The images are darker and noisier than the main cams, but they're solid for this sort of camera. Low-light photos from the ultra-wide cam aren't very usable. They're quite soft, and they all are out of focus. It's too bad because otherwise there's good exposure, nice colors, and low noise. The Moto Edge 20 has a 32-megapixel quad-bayer front-facing cam, and its 8-megapixel selfies are great. If there's plenty of light, they come out sharp and detailed, with accurate colors and good contrast. The dynamic range is decent too, thanks to HDR. Videos can be captured with the main camera and up to 4K resolution at 30 FPS. The quality is solid for the class, with plenty of detail, low noise, great contrast, and praiseworthy dynamic range. The colors are a bit off though, and the sharpening is a little too much, and electronic stabilization isn't supported in 4K. The telephoto cam can only shoot videos in 1080p resolution. These are likable, with natural colors and balanced processing. Dynamic range is good as well. The ultra-wide also shoots 1080p videos. These have enough detail for this type of camera, low noise, and wide dynamic range. So that's the Motorola Edge 20. You get a flagship-grade OLED display with both a super fast refresh rate and touch sampling rate. The design is edgy and unique, and the triple cameras are quite versatile. There's a clean Android UI and fast charging, and while the chipset isn't top of the line, it's powerful enough even for heavy gaming. The downsides here are that you don't get stereo speakers or a headphone jack, which the original Moto Edge did have, and battery life is mediocre for the class by today's standards. But even so, the Moto Edge 20 is a nice upper mid-ranger, and if the screen and camera experience are your priority, it's worth recommending. Thanks for watching guys, stay safe and see you on the next one.